Apologies for the delay for those who have been watching. We were having audio issues. Ms. St. John Cunning, we're ready to proceed.
Okay, thank you. So Sandy Anderson has requested to be virtual today due to medical reasons. She is located in the Springfield district today. All in favor of her being virtual? Opposed? Abstain? Okay, it's unanimous with all members here that she should be virtual. So I call this meeting to order now. I want to thank everybody for being here and apologize for the late changes. There were some issues, but we wanted to make sure we met today instead of rescheduling the meeting. So I want to start off by just doing an overview of what we've done in the last 6 months. Sorry. What we've done in the last 6 months. We did an overview of the operating manual to try to bring more consistency to all of the advisory committees, and went through that. We spent a lot of time doing that, and the things that have been left undone, which I'd like to discuss today, are having the things that we wanted to do was to create training for the staff liaisons, because there had been confusion on how the staff liaisons would participate, their roles. And so we've got to create that training. We want to build and roll out a toolkit, because a lot of people that come in new to our advisory committees don't know what to do, don't know how to participate, so we want to provide that. And then also look at all of the committees with an eye to the future and how their role fits into the strategic plan. So I think I'm going to ask Ms. Anderson, who was really instrumental in working on the advisory committee operating manual, to just elaborate a little bit more for us.
Yeah, we had identified the pieces of the manual that needed more information and needed to be built out. So that would need to be determine who was going to do each portion of that and how the committee was going to be able to work together to get that portion done. We also had put in a forum topic late in the year last year to go ahead and look at all of the different committees. Specifically, there were a few that needed, as we were working through the manual, we determined that there were a few that probably needed more board discussion in some way, and it could stem from PAC to start. And then, but yeah, those are the two biggest things, but I do think that it's an excellent idea to also make sure that we identify the pieces in the manual that go specifically to staff liaisons, so that we can make sure that those folks have the information that they need to be successful too.
So I think the important thing that we have to try to determine here, and as work backwards, is how to build a timeline on developing the toolkit and the training and the people that have the competency to do it, and how to divide that. I am obviously new to this, and so I'm learning, and I take advice and support from anyone and ideas of how we can move forward. And also, just if you all had a chance to, when we approved this at the school board meeting, if you guys had any questions or concerns, which you would have had a chance to bring up at that point, but after looking at it now, if there's anything that you want to bring up.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Okay, I was looking at the manual again last night. That one of the things that came to my mind was, these are school boards advisory committees, community advisory committees, not to the staff, but school board. Ultimately, it's going to be the school board that has to respond to the advisory committee's recommendations. Please correct me because I was going through the manual pretty quickly last night. That in the manual, I failed to see, ultimately after the staff provides a response at the end, by the end of first quarter, how the school board is ultimately going to react to a staff's responses in conjunction with advisory committee's recommendations. Staff may have one response, but the board may have a different reaction. So because since they are, again, school boards, community advisory committees, I believe that we owe it to the members serving on those committees to show what the board's decision on the advisory committee's recommendations will be. That's something that I didn't see in the manual. If I missed it, please correct me. But in the past, even in the past, school boards struggled over the years because of workload issues and timeline issues. Sometimes, school boards try to bite too much and just become, not having enough sufficient time to do that. But I think we do need to spend a little more time on their recommendations and let them know that, your recommendations are accepted, or this is what we believe that we can do and will accept, etc. So I believe in school board providing the advisory committees our formal responses to their recommendations.
Ms. Marin.
Hi, good morning. I do agree with Mr. Moon's sentiment, and I'll share some more thoughts on that. I just wanted to understand where further on the priorities. I did look back at the agenda from the last Public Engagement Committee meeting, and that was in June 18th. And so, yes, the first item was the timeline and implementation and training of the new Community Advisory Committee operating manual, so that's great. But the other thing was the discussion of the forum topic on the alternative student representative. So that was something our previous student rep had brought forth, so I do want to make sure that that stays on the agenda from June 18th. And I would also love to have the minutes from that PEC meeting posted, so perhaps the chair can work to be sure that any past committee meetings, because that was helpful for today. So yes, I agree to do the toolkit for the operating manual so our advisory committee members know best how to engage. That seems pretty important and straightforward in some ways, although I think we should suss out where we would like staff's help with that in terms of creating that toolkit and what best practices have worked in their experience with committees. Regarding the staff liaisons, I'm challenged to see how that specifically relates to the Public Engagement Committee of the board. I get that our staff liaisons are representative to the community, but we are the first facing as well. So I don't really feel like that's well placed here on this committee. I think, the board has discussed about its own internal human resources priorities, and I think that it's better placed there. So I would rather not spend PEC's time on that. Or if we do, then have to be very, very specifically what the forward-facing community engagement piece is, whether that's how to engage with the committees or staff, the board member of a committee, but not very much wider than that. Regarding the review of the standing and community advisory committees, this was actually something I have been interested in since before I was on the board, when I was nominated by Pat Hines to be on an advisory committee like back in 2017, 2018. So I think looking at the committees and are they meeting our current purpose? We've talked in the past about things like, should we have a technology advisory committee? Should we have a student discipline, committee? Thinking about, and this really gets to Mr. Moon's point, what's the value add that we're seeking from these people that we ask them to donate their time and expertise to us? So I'm very much interested in that. And then, but I agree again with Mr. Moon that I think we should spend some time figuring out how do we ensure that the recommendations and the work informs our work. And we could talk about whether we continue with a year-end, presentation, but that always seems very rushed. So could we have, monthly or quarterly meetings with people? Like, I'd love to get creative because I think people really are thirsty for that on our committees and they have a lot to offer. So I'll leave it at that for now.
I know that some of the points you brought up were things that were discussed about how we get that committee report at the end and how we can, where we can put it to where we could use it more as a school, as a school board to react to that. In terms of the staff liaisons, we did do, and Ms. Anderson can speak more to this, she did send out surveys to people that were on the advisory committees about what was important. I know we had several members tell us that they felt that if they had a good staff liaison, it was really helpful to expedite their work because that was the way that they could get information to move forward. And I think Ms. Anderson can speak a little bit more to some of that discussion that she had with the advisory committee members from she did some surveys to get feedback on that.
Can I ask, I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood. Were you saying staff aides, like our own staff? Are you talking about the staff liaison of the department okay, well then and then I amend my comment.
Staff liaisons.
Right, so the staff in FCPS of that particular office that serves as the leader of, the coordinator of the work between the board and the committee.
Correct.
Okay, I amend my comment, and I do think it's worth talking about that. I thought we were talking about our staff aides, so my apologies.
I'm sorry, okay.
Madam Chair, on that point, could I ask, staff members where you're, when the staff liaisons are appointed to these committees, is that superintendent? Does superintendent get herself involved in picking the best person to do it, or how does does that come from assistant superintendents for departments or chiefs or?
So currently, right now, it's being done by the chiefs, but from my understanding, with the changes to the advisory committee handbook starting next school year, I believe Dr. Reed is going to be involved in helping the chiefs to pick the staff liaisons for each committee. So the board chose to hold on how staff liaisons are picked for this school year because by the time the board passed the advisory committee handbook, there was the staff liaisons for this school year had already been assigned. So for next school year, Dr. Reed is going to be involved.
Okay, good. If a Dr. Reed is going to be appointing, picking staff liaisons, she'll be the best person to pick the best person to be the liaisons, and somewhat close to what Miss Mara has stated earlier, that I wouldn't be qualified to train anyone. I don't know whether other school board members are qualified to train, but I think it has to come from someone from administration to take that responsibility, to the right person to act as a staff liaison, because pretty much staff liaison's role is to support the work of the advisory committees, and I wouldn't know how to train that person.
Ms. Anderson?
Okay, I just wanted to speak to a few things related to what we've been talking about. The first is the idea behind the training for the staff liaisons is not necessarily training them how to be staff liaisons. It's training them on what the information is in the governance manual or in the operating manual that is the requirement for that position. So it's not a formal training. It's more of here's a quick sheet that explains everything that's in here that is your responsibility. So there are things like they're technically responsible for taking the minutes, but they can identify a person on the committee that will take the minutes for them. It's things like that we are going to hold as expectations for those folks. So because these are our committees, that I think that it's reasonable for us to make sure that they know what our expectations are. And so that was the only purpose behind creating some sort of opportunity to share information with them. A path forward on the student rep has been provided to the chair. We are going to talk about that further as a group. I believe we didn't at the end, just to give you a brief update, we didn't feel comfortable as a committee making that determination at the end of the last year because it was so close to the time that they had already been chosen. So this committee does need to talk about whether or not there should be two student reps and how that would factor in that whole process. So that was moved to this. We identified the fact that Rita and Miss Crane had done so much work related to getting that set up that we did come up with an idea of a way to keep her involved that was really related to helping create the manual ongoing for new staff, for new student reps going into the future. It would still keep her involved this year. We have a unique opportunity with her because of the fact that she was a junior when she was on the board with us. And so moving forward, it would give her the opportunity to stay involved with what's going on with the board, but it wouldn't have overstepped what authority we had at the moment to go ahead and just appoint her without following some sort of other process. So it was kind of the midway point between those two things. I also agree that we need to talk about how the school board should be responding to the reports themselves. That is likely a change that would be needed to the governance manual, not necessarily just the operating manual. So we should keep that in mind and be talking to our colleagues that are on governance as well.
Since there seems to be silence in the room, then Madam Chair, on the point about having heard Vice Chair Sandy Anderson's statement about training, if it is about going through our manuals related to the roles and duties of staff liaison, the best person to give that training is perhaps either current PAC chair or former PAC chair who had intimately involved in crafting the manual.
I'm happy to help create that document. That would be a way that we could give a clear expectation.
It could be former and current, chairs working together.
Right, yes, and we will create that together. I will definitely, that's something that we can do. And again, thank you, Ms. Anderson, for explaining that a little bit better than I was able to. I think what we really need to look at is the toolkit and building out the toolkit for our advisory committee members and how that might look and who might be able to help do that. I mean, I'm happy to start researching it. I've never built a toolkit before, and I'm happy to learn and try to start learning how we could do that and the pieces that could be there and turn to people that might help support that. I think I know the pieces that I can do, but I also think that there are pieces I may not be able to do, and I don't know what the qualifications are of people on this board that would be willing to help with that.
So I think the toolkit, that's a very tangible thing that, we are committed to doing. I do think, though, having time for this committee here to have a discussion about what do we really want the advisories committees to do, and do we want to engage them differently than just a year-end report? I think we need to figure that out before we create a toolkit about how to do that work. I've seen a variety of members over the years. Some meet with all of their appointees quarterly, so the whole gamut of, a dozen people. So what are the benefits and drawbacks of that? I know I've tried to do quarterly meetings one by one. Some committee members have said, can we come to a board meeting and report out mid-year and help? So these are like things I think before we start describing how to do it, like, can we talk here, perhaps at the next committee meeting, come with those thoughts and say, what have we heard? What do we think is useful? And then I do think also talking about, are these standing committees the best ones to have at this time? There's some that, of course, are legally mandated, but even so for the ones that aren't, is the membership sufficient? We talked about for our advisory committee for students with disabilities, which is required by law, there's only one teacher seat on there. So do we want to add more seats? So I think perhaps going through the committee membership and thinking about, we know, maybe we add another student rep to things. Maybe that's a extrapolation of that forum topic of having a student board rep in addition, but what about an alternative on these committees? You know, we have so many students, how do we get them more engaged? So for me, if I were to, what your, charge, Ms. St. John Cunning was, what's the timeline? I'd love to have a conversation, just kind of let's brainstorm, come with ideas, and then figure out what sounds good. We could even ask our other colleagues not on the committee, and thinking about what do we ultimately want to come with, and how does that dovetail with the works the committee is already doing? Like, so are they just on their way to do another year of give us a report at the end and then get 1 hour? Or are we going to try and adjust that this year to something that reflects their feedback, which is they want more meaningful engagement? So for your consideration, colleagues.
Okay, Ms. Anderson.
I agree. We did up the student reps on each committee to 2 as a response from the committee members that were interested in having more engagement, and also the student rep who recognized the fact that she did have a lot of people that were interested. We need to be very careful, particularly when we're talking about the legally mandated committees. ACSD is not allowed to have more than one by law, more than one teacher. So we have to keep that as one teacher and make sure that we have those folks in there. That doesn't necessarily mean that they can't invite more teachers in if they need more information. It just means that it can only be one committee member that is a teacher. And then also, so there, I know SHAC is the same way, is that they're specifically mandated to have a certain number of people on the committee. So we can look at that. I think that it might be a good idea to start by looking at specific committees. And I'll just share that the reason that I brought that forum topic is both because I believe that due to our engagement or our new practice of collective bargaining, I do believe that HRAC, we need to figure out how we're going to move forward with that specific committee. And also, when I was doing all the work on the operating manual, it became very clear to me that FLECAC is not a committee of the board. It is a committee of the superintendent. And so what I would suggest my path forward would be to move that to a superintendent committee and leave board engagement on the committee. So we would still have members that we would nominate to the committee, but it's not our committee because it's the only one that's treated completely differently than all of the other committees. And so that is the reason that I brought that forum topic forward, in addition to the fact that Ms. Marin and Ms. Sizemore-Heiser had mentioned several times the interest in looking at other committees that were available. But those are the 2 that immediately stuck out as ones that we probably need to figure out how we're going to, what the path forward is.
Mr. Moon, did you have something to say?
Yes. I was going to second Ms. Maron's suggestions about perhaps staggering the presentation of reports when they come, all of them at the end of the year. It's really become difficult for a board to give them a meaningful attention and time and have a discussion of their recommendations on which they have spent a lot of time and efforts. So perhaps, starting from, committee's work this year for the presentation next year, we can perhaps adjust rather than having everybody doing Zoom, maybe some of the committees doing Zoom, maybe, some others do it in the September timeframe. And December, we could give them a longer time frame to do their work and report back to us.
Again, I think that's something that we discussed, and I think we can look into it, and maybe we can be intentional about which committees we feel we need that mid-year or quarterly feedback, and which ones require more time. But I know that it is not only frustrating for the board, but I think it's also frustrating for the advisory committees members when they bring those reports to us and then want to see some action, and we're already at the end of the year. So I think that's something that we could look at and consider, and look at how we could maybe stagger that. I think new ideas and the institutional memory will help us come up with a solution to that.
I mean, some of the committees even ask for longer time frame for them to work on the charge the school board has given them. So it makes sense, not to rush everybody to finish their work by May time frame for presentation in June.
Right, no, I agree. I think the 6 months, and I really have to applaud Ms. Anderson, because she really took the bull by the horns on this and did a real deep dive and helped all of the rest of the committee members, the new ones particularly, understand this, and I really appreciate that. But again, with that deep dive, we realized that there was a lot of things that we still had to look at. And continuing that work, I think, is important, but I think that deep dive gave us a really strong basis to move forward. So I think the idea of, in conjunction with maybe starting to look at a timeline, like, I don't think we have to do one before the other. I think maybe we can start working at it. I mean, working on how we can start doing some basic toolkit items, again, never having done a toolkit myself, but how we can do some things that are basic, but at the same time, as Ms. Marin has suggested, looking at how we start defining some other things. Because we do want our advisory committee members to know some basics of how they should proceed. Like, does that make sense? Like, there's an overall basic, and then fill in the specifics. Go ahead.
Well, perhaps something that we could do between now and the next committee meeting, and knowing that our advisory committees are going to start meeting, is preparing something that says, hey, you have a new operating manual. We really want to hear how you think it's going, and maybe even preparing some kind of script for or with our staff liaisons and our board liaisons to introduce it, because perhaps committee members weren't aware that all this work happened in spring, or they're new. So preparing to roll that out, that's, to me, that's like an immediate need, and then we could get to the nitty gritty, or maybe just having them have their eyes open to it and giving us feedback will help us develop the toolkit, rather than trying to frame it out now, before it's been used. So that's one response to that. The other thing I'm thinking is the operating manual speaks to the advisory committees, but we also have additional committees and appointees that we make for curriculum review, such as we have the social studies curriculum that's going to be coming up. I think we're supposed to approve our committee members like in the next meeting or two. And so especially for new members of the board, I don't know if they've done that. And then there's new committee, there's every other year, there's appointees to whether it's challenge books or other things that come up. So there's a whole set of things for that could be clarified and established, not maybe it can dovetail with the operating manual, but even just having the collection of, here are all the ad hoc things, and this is how they work over the year and the timeline. So, that could be its own little discrete little project that is needed too.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
I think that's a really good idea. I don't necessarily think that information should live in the operating manual, but it does need to at least live somewhere where it's identified as something that needs to be considered. The other immediate needs is there are tasks that the committees are going to have to do this year. One is for everybody who doesn't currently have bylaws, they're going to need to create bylaws, and we did give them a deadline within the manual itself. If they have bylaws, then they will need to be reapproved by the board this year, and we're kind of setting this as a starting point for everything, and then every 2 years they would need to be updated. I think that it's an interesting idea to stagger the reports. We did talk about that quite a bit. I do think that we could try it out first with somebody like FPAC, where the commitment is longer. And so I'm wondering if that is part of it, is that if it's the commitment would have to change from being 1 year to 2 years, because the only reason that we had an issue with that from the last section, or the last time we discussed it, was because it's the end of July to the beginning of the beginning of August to the next end of July. There was no way to create continuity within the reporting process with one discrete group. So that was part of the problem, is that we couldn't come up with a way to figure out how to stagger the dates without having different staggered start and end times related to the committees. And so that was one of the reasons that we had a pause with that. I know that we only have about 10 minutes or so left. I was wondering whether or not we wanted to discuss specifically how to move forward with those two committees that I brought up, and then have that be the opportunity, and then maybe at the next meeting, we could actually discuss what other committees we wanted to bring forward after we talk to our colleagues.
Do any of you have any ideas about the two committees that Ms. Anderson brought up, particularly in light of collective bargaining and our Human Resources Committee?
I'm the liaison to HRAC. I think there are certain things outside the issues, items that will be subject to collective bargaining. HRAC can still play a certain role in certain other issues. I think that requires honest discussion with the members who have raised their hand and devoted their time for many years serving on the committee. That starting with perhaps a closed session with a legal counsel, with the community advisory committee members, so that they can have a better understanding of why, their work may have to shift, may have to be altered. That's a suggestion I have as a school board liaison. Start with a conversation with the legal counsel in a closed session for advisory committee members, and then go from there.
I think that's a good suggestion. I know that people that serve on this committee are very passionate. When we had our closed session on collective bargaining and the issues, it was hard for me to see what other places that committee could help in, because now it does become a legal issue, so we do need that legal advice. So that's something that I think that, I believe that's the best way for us to handle it, is to get the legal advice and see if it is something that can continue, and if so, what the scope could be, or if it's not, then we can explain that to our members. So I do agree with that point.
Okay, yeah. To make it clear that legal advice is something that the members on the advisory committee need to hear from the legal counsel closed session and have a Q&A.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of, is there any more discussion on that?
So just to understand, so you're saying you want to have a closed meeting of the Human Resources Advisory Committee with all of those members?
Yes.
Okay. Perhaps, okay. So that seems like that is something to go to the chair and vice chair for consideration for scheduling? Is that a next step?
I don't know whether HRAC itself can ask for closed session meeting with the legal counsel, or it has to come from school board chair and vice chair. But if a school board chair and vice chair could discuss this and then suggest to HRAC directly or through me, either way, I think HRAC members gotta know the legal implications having that discussion out in open.
Okay, I think that's something that I will defer to the chair and vice chair, because I'm not sure how that works. So I will defer to them and get some research and find out how that does work. Ms. Anderson, okay, go ahead, Ms. Anderson.
I will absolutely take that back to the chair, and we'll figure out how to make that possible. I know that up to this point, I believe only CPDC has been in closed session related to resumes related to people that were going to come on to FPAC. So I'm not 100% sure how that works for a committee. we'd have to see, that was the board's standing committee that went into closed. It wasn't necessarily
It is
the advisory committee. So I just need to check with Mr. Foster to see how that would work.
I think it can be done. I think it should be done because they need to hear, again, the legal reasons why.
Yes, and I understand the implication of what you're discussing. I do want to reiterate at some point that, again, because this is our committee, we need to make sure that we have a consensus of how we want to move forward as a board to make sure that we address that correctly. And the question I have is, I would love to see how other divisions across the country are utilizing this type of committee when they're under collective bargaining. So I think that it would be very helpful. I do think that this would be an opportunity that we would need to revise the charge pretty significantly to make sure that we were very careful in how the charge was created. I also think that it may be a possibility that if we were able to move forward with this committee, it would be the responsibility of the board to create the charge fully rather than the committee itself, so that we could keep the lane very clean as to what was being discussed and what wasn't. So just to make sure that we didn't have any issues.
I think those are all excellent suggestions from everyone. Ms. Anderson, I would like for you to explain a little bit more about your reasoning for, which I agree with, but I find you're more eloquent in the subject for FLAC.
So FLECAC is the only one that, when we looked into it, is the only one that has a regulation standing behind it. It's the only one that's treated a very particular way. It has more student engagement than any other committee that we've got. And I have often been concerned about the privacy of the students when we're dealing with sensitive topics. And so if the board is simply appointing members to the superintendent's committee, and I have not discussed this with her, I am wondering whether or not it makes the most sense for us to be able to give those opportunities for students to participate in committees, that particularly of the sensitive nature of FLECAC, whether or not it makes the most sense. So there's two reasons that I brought this up, is because, first of all, I'm concerned just to make sure that we keep our students safe. But the second thing is that this is really not, we don't provide the charge. We don't manage a lot of the different components of this. It really serves as a superintendent's committee. And so I would hate to have somebody misunderstand what the goal was there. So that's the reason that I brought it forward, because again, it doesn't act like any other committee that we've got. There was a mistake in the operating manual or in the governance manual for a long time. The committee itself is not legally required. It's allowed, but the actual teaching of FLE is what's required by law. This is always going to. The difference is this recommendation is different than every other recommendation as well, is that it requires a board vote, because we are not teaching strictly to the standards provided by the state of Virginia. We have to always vote as a board anyways, so any recommendation that comes out of FLECAC is a board vote. So again, that's why it's a little different than every other advisory committee that we have. And so I just wanted to have us have an opportunity to discuss whether or not we thought that it was in the right place.
Thank you for providing that background. We discussed this a lot with our previous PAC, at the previous PAC committee, and we kind of all came to the conclusion that that made sense. I don't know what your feelings are on that. I'd like, if you have any feedback, if you agree with that. And then we can move on the process to go ahead and change that.
But I'm sorry, could you restate your question again?
So I wanted, the previous PEC committee kind of came to a consensus that this made sense. And so since you are new members, I wanted to get your feedback on what your feeling was. And if that's what you felt, then we could start the process of making it a superintendent committee, with us still being able to appoint members, but making it a superintendent committee versus a school board committee. We still have to vote on whatever that comes out.
I am going to reserve my judgment on that at this point, because now that's new to me, right? So I don't know how to react to that at this point. I have to give some thought.
Right, and that's why I wanted to review, like, I thought this meeting was important for us to kind of go over all the work that had been done beforehand. And, you know when I came into PAC, I didn't know a lot of things, and I'm still learning things. So that's why I wanted this first meeting to kind of review the work that was done in the past 6 months. Ms. Mirren?
Yeah, just in recognizing the time that we're at today. So I could see as a next step that work of reviewing the topic areas of the committee and the membership of the committees, and that FLECAC question being part of that work. And then we could, again, have that conversation or hear, more fully the laying out of the reasons why we should move it, and then bringing to the board, a whole roster, however big or small it might be, with, okay, we recommend, these are the changes to the committee, memberships and topics we recommend. What do you think? And we could have a discussion about that. So I'd rather do it all at once to get like a whole view, and then do one at a time, especially at the first meeting. So I see that as a next step.
Okay, I mean, I think, again, that makes sense. I just wanted to bring everybody up to speed and give you time to look at it and think about it, and just give you the background of where we had come to in 6 months. And again, for the new members on the committee, we didn't have that full year. We had 6 months. And in 6 months, again, just compliment Ms. Anderson for the work she did do. I think we have some ideas laid out here. I'll make sure that we get minutes into a place where everyone can access that, and then I will go through and look at what it is that we all want to consider, and we'll reach out and I'll do some research in terms of some of the things that have been suggested and how we can move forward. If there's nothing else, then we can end this meeting on time.
I love them, Madam Chair.
Thank you all for your flexibility today. I promise to be healthier for the next one.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. I really do appreciate, and again, to come here the day after a long weekend and the little kerfuffle with time, I really appreciate everyone's flexibility and grace. And I'm looking forward to the next year and what we can come up with.
I love your gentle leadership, Madam Chair.
So the meeting is adjourned, correct?
Oh, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.